Joining me right now to talk more about that debate is the Trafalgar Group chief pollster, Robert Cahaly, and the Harris Poll chairman and former senior advisor to the Clintons, Mark Penn. Gentlemen, great to see you both. We so appreciate you joining me this morning. I want to get your take on a reaction to the debate. Mark, kick us off. What do you think?
Well, there really isn't much debate about the debate. Everyone did think that J.D. Vance won the debate, that, frankly, he went into the debate with a lot of negative ratings. He had been, I think, really dusted up in the press, and I think he had the aim to be more likable, to seem more approachable, to relate to working-class voters, and I think he largely succeeded in that. Waltz did a pretty good job. He was nervous. He wasn't as clear on the issues. He didn't do a bad job. He doesn't come away from this, sulking, I think. But I think the unanimous decision is that Vance did a better job and did a lot to improve his image.
Yeah, and that's what the media is saying this morning. The Wall Street Journal called J.D. Vance polished. The New York Post, Tim Waltz staggered by cool J.D. Vance. Same question for you. As we watch this new Quinnipiac poll shows an expanding race in key swing states. In Georgia, President Trump has a 6-point lead over Kamala Harris, 50% to 44%. Check out North Carolina, Trump still with the edge, 49% to 47%. And when it comes to top issues Americans are concerned about, the economy and immigration, voters once again give it to Trump to handle them better than Harris in both states. Meanwhile, a new AARP poll is putting the focus on older voters. Harris leads Trump by 3 points with likely voters there. The number jumps for Trump with voters over 50. 53% want the former president, while 44% would cast a vote for Harris. Robert, your thoughts on whether last night's debate moved the needle?
I think there's a good chance that it did move the needle in the sense that Vance had really been kind of painted as some kind of a meme character, some kind of a boogeyman, and he really came across and articulated the America First message probably better than anybody could. And it wasn't just that he defeated Waltz. He also defeated the moderators. He did what a lot of people were sitting on the couch in the last debate wanting to see done, calling them out when they did something they said they wouldn't do. They broke their own rules, and he called them on it, and they quit doing that. That the impact I think it'll have is, one, it continues to drive this message that Trump is more prepared, but most important, everybody knows who Trump is, and it's the fact that they don't know who she is. And so as she gets more defined, it is beneficial to Trump. And this is helping define her, drilling this message of she's been vice president. Why is she talking about things she would do and hasn't done them? That's the message that's coming through to people. And that this idea that she's saying what she's got to say to get elected, but she doesn't match her record is a message that really came through and is a message that is moving this electorate.
Well, I mean, look, I think that's true that J.D. Vance was calm, and I think he's getting applauded this morning for just staying steady and not losing his cool. But I think he missed a few opportunities to basically litigate against Kamala Harris, to underline the fact that inflation went to 40-year highs because of all of her spending, $7 trillion in spending in the last 4 years, or the border, and to talk more about the murders that we've seen at the hands of illegal migrants. Mark, did he miss some opportunities there, do you think?
Yeah, I was actually surprised. He pulled a lot of punches, particularly about this immigration bill. I thought he would come back and say that bill had 5,000 people a day who get to come in first, and it was never going to pass when you actually look at what was happening to the various votes on the bills. That coalition was never happening because the bill was in fact a bad bill. So I noticed a lot of times where he pulled the punches, but because I think he really didn't want to come off as too negative. He didn't go after Waltz's war record or anything like that, but it seemed to work for him. Everybody said he did a better job, but like you, I was surprised he didn't go in on some of these issues in a much tougher way against Waltz.
Yeah, and I think the Senate bill is a great example of that. You're absolutely right. It was a bad bill, and at the end of the day, the Democrats like to say, well, Republicans crafted it, right? James Lankford, but didn't at the end of the day James Lankford vote against it? When all was said and done. Yeah. So, I mean, he had all this stuff that he could have said, and he didn't. So I felt that there were some missed opportunities there. but that's just me. Mark, are you surprised, and both question for you both real quick here, are you surprised that these polls are so tight, given the fact that it's been the Trump side that's been really communicative in terms of their policy plans, and yet she's able to, you know, garner lots of support even with very little information about what she plans to do?
It is amazing, given that most the country and the economy is the wrong direction, that they are so close. But they are so close. No one can tell you who is going to win this race today.
Robert, final word.
Well, we're seeing the same thing, and we're actually seeing Trump with a quick advantage as we move down these newer polls, just getting stronger.
All right, we will leave it there. Robert Cahaly, Mark Penn, always a pleasure to speak with you both, gentlemen. Thank you. We'll be right back.